Trigger warning. This episode contains content related to homicidal and suicidal ideation due to postpartum psychosis. Please note that this conversation is very candid and raw, and the content may be distressing to some. Please exercise care when listening and use discretion when deciding if this episode is for you at this time. Always seek professional support where needed. Today I speak with Aaisha Alvi, who grew up in a loving family and always envisioned becoming a mother. From an Indian cultural background, she received premium postpartum care from her family and had not previously struggled with depression. However, early in postpartum, Aaisha began to experience anxiety, violent intrusive thoughts, delusions and hallucinations that felt both terrifying and isolating. She would later discover that what she was experiencing had been the symptoms of postpartum psychosis, a postpartum mental health disorder that actually might not be as rare as we think, but requires immediate medical attention. This episode is not designed to frighten, but rather bring awareness, remove the stigma, and debunk some of the myths relating to the reasons behind this potentially life-threatening, yet completely treatable illness. Thank you, Aaisha, for being so brave in sharing your story. Aaisha's story serves as a powerful reminder that recovery is possible and that no mother should feel ashamed of her struggles. It's also a reminder to welcome postpartum support systems, including family and healthcare providers during the postpartum period. And if you or anyone you know are experiencing any of the behaviours detailed in this episode, please seek medical attention immediately. Take care. Hi, Aaisha. Welcome to the podcast. I'm really honoured to have you on today. It's going to be a very special and important conversation that we have. So if we can just jump straight in and you can tell us where you grew up and your journey into becoming a mother.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Katura, for having me on this podcast episode. I really appreciate the opportunity to spread awareness. So, my name is Aaisha Alvi. I grew up in Ontario, which is in Canada, and I lived here pretty much all my life, except for a few months when I didn't live in this province, but still in Canada. Um, Basically, I grew up in what I like to think of as a very loving family, and I always felt, very emotionally secure in my household. And from a very early age, because my mother was a stay-at-home mom, who worked as a stay-at-home mom because it's a lot of work. I always saw and envisioned motherhood as being part of my future. And I remember telling my fiance when we got engaged that I wanted like more than one child, maybe two or three children. So it was always something that, I envisaged as being part of my journey into adulthood, being a mom. And so because of this, when my husband and I were ready to start a family after about 5 years of being married, I was like super excited um, when I got pregnant. And I had always planned to take some time off of the career that I was in and stay at home for a bit before going back to my career. So it was like, something that I was really excited about, like, spending time with my little one and stuff. And so essentially I would say like I was really looking forward to motherhood. I knew that there'd be messy moments, but I was, all in for it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's always so interesting to listen to how a mother's expectations are, like what they are before she has her baby. And then, of course, there's always a lot of stories, and some of those expectations are met and others aren't. But it sounds as though you grew up in a very stable home in which you felt like family was just, part of the journey.
Mhm.
Um, but also, you come from an Indian culture, is that right?
Yes, my
Yeah.
background.
So
Yeah.
share a little bit with us about some of the traditional ways that women are cared for after they have a baby and how that actually looked for you.
Yeah, because of the part of India that I'm from, because I want to recognize that practices differ across, different parts of India. But what I'm speaking to is the practices, um, as per like the part of India that I'm from, and part of that is for a new mom to go and live with her mom for 40 days after she gives birth. So she can kind of be mothered by her mom and family and be taken care of. And so this is what I also did. It wasn't really something that my husband really liked the idea of, but he wanted to be with our baby as soon as she was ready to join the family. And so he also came and joined me at my mom's house, and so I
Hmm.
had like a whole bunch of people ready to support me. And in terms of what it really looked like for me was that, my mother was there. She was preparing wholesome foods to encourage milk production. She was there to give me herbal massages. And both my parents, my mom and my dad and my husband, they all helped care for my daughter so that I could get the rest that I needed. And I think personally, between all of them, I was not even really involved in doing much for my newborn beyond nursing. And that's what that time is really for. So it's for the mother to be mothered. And it's like an acknowledgement that this is a new thing that a mother is embarking upon. And she needs to be given the time to recover and then learn how to mother. Because it's not just the newborn that's new. This is new for a mom too. And I personally love that concept. It's really, I didn't really love it at back when I had first heard about it, but now doing all the postpartum work that I do, I'm like every mom should have this period of being mothered before she's expected to mother. It's a wonderful concept that I think everybody can benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as you're probably aware, I'm a postpartum doula,
Yeah.
and I do take a lot of what I practice from an Ayurvedic perspective, and
Oh.
from some of these traditional cultures, and it just makes so much sense. The mothers that I do see that are
Hmm.
from various cultures that observe this, it really is a focused care on them, as you said, because they're also going through a big transition and also going through their own birth in actually
Hmm.
becoming a mother. So makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense to know that the mother needs to be mothered as well as the baby. So I love
Yeah.
that. And yeah, it's truly beautiful. And I agree. We should be adopting this all around the world.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Yeah. So, how did those? I know you've mentioned that you had the support of all your family, and you didn't really have a lot of responsibilities at that time. So,
Hmm.
how did those early days, weeks? Did you enjoy them, or did they
Um,
feel kind of typical of what you thought it would be like?
so like I mentioned, I was being really well cared for in those first few days, but they were still very rough. I started like feeling down pretty soon after. But I think I was expecting that. I'd heard of that. I wasn't really expecting it, but when it kind of hit, I kind of was like, well, I have heard of the baby blues.
Mm,
But then the depressive feelings like really started worsening. And I couldn't really understand it because I was like, I don't know why I'm depressed. You know what I mean? I didn't
yeah.
feel like there was any reason why I should be depressed. And then those depressive feelings kind of changed and they started growing into anxiety. And that's when I was like, okay, like what's going on here? Because I started becoming this obsessive person where I kept wondering if my daughter was getting enough to drink. And I started obsessively like journaling about each of her feeding sessions, how many minutes I was feeding for, when, like which side. Like I was like obsessively journaling these things, and because I wanted to convince myself that I wasn't accidentally starving her. And um and then and then all of a sudden, instead of just being like these random thoughts about like what if I'm starving her, I started to experience intrusive thoughts at this time too. And
Mm,
intrusive thoughts, as you probably know, are random thoughts or images that can pop up in your mind. And mine were actually quite violent and frightening. Like I had images of my daughter's head being bashed in and blood everywhere, and just her being like her face drowning in the water. And these are things that I had never before experienced in my life because I don't have any previous history of mental health issues. And so they were really frightening to me. And at that time, I didn't know that 90% of parents, both moms and dads, experience intrusive thoughts. So it was just like, wow, what is this? And I was just like terrified by them. And like very like much wondering like if it meant I really didn't want to be a mom. And I was wondering if I had like subconscious feelings about harming my daughter and stuff. So that was definitely not a time that I felt was normal. Although it
Yeah.
is actually, it is very normal because a lot of parents do experience intrusive thoughts, but I didn't feel that those were normal at that time.
Yeah, thank you so much for being very honest in sharing that, because it is some of those things that you've shared are things that we do tend to keep quite quiet, don't we? We silence them.
Hmm.
And I know the mothers that I work with, there is a lot of hypervigilance in them.
Hmm.
So I think, like you were saying in the beginning, it started out in kind of a more of an anxiety, worrying more than necessary about whether the baby was eating enough. And I think a lot of that comes from, so many things, but part of it is that the brain has changed, hasn't it?
Hmm.
And it's
Yes.
now, absolutely geared for keeping that baby alive. And, for a lot of us, it's no wonder that we start getting, super overdrived about that.
Hmm.
But as it was getting a little bit more, and intrusive thoughts too, it's something that we all have thoughts, don't we?
Hmm.
Every human has thoughts. We have thousands of thoughts a day, and not all of them are what we expected to come into our mind.
Hmm.
What was the realization for you that these thoughts were starting to maybe feel not normal, or was someone around you aware of this, or were you keeping this all to yourself?
Yeah. So, again, like I didn't think my intrusive thoughts were normal, but they are normal. They're
Yeah.
like parents do have them, and a lot of moms will have them. Sorry. And then I wasn't really sharing them with anyone else because I was scared that they would think that I wanted to harm my daughter.
Mm.
And I don't think anybody in my family really noticed, except they saw that my mood was off, right?
Yeah.
um and I know that they maybe suspected like what's wrong with her because I was so terrified by my intrusive thoughts. At one point I suggested to my husband that maybe we should give my daughter up for adoption, which I'm so embarrassed
Mm.
about. But I was like so scared that it meant I wasn't a good mom, that I wanted to keep her safe, and I thought maybe she would be better with somebody else. And I remember the look on my husband's face and my mom's face, and I think at that point they were probably like, what is wrong with this woman? But again,
Mm.
those were all like normal. Those were not, though that was not really the beginning of psychosis. I want to be clear about that because in the advocacy work that I do, a lot of moms with intrusive thoughts are afraid that that means that they're psychotic, and intrusive thoughts are completely normal. That does not mean that they're not frightening. They were frightening, but they're not indicative of losing your mind or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of them are just that protective mechanism in our brain, isn't it, to keep our baby safe?
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
hypervigilance.
So tell us then about your postpartum psychosis. When did that start? Can you share? We'd be very grateful if you shared your story.
Yeah, so I think then I was feeling like very depressed, and now I was feeling even more depressed because the intrusive thoughts were now like making me question, me as a person. And I was like, what's wrong with me type of thing. And so I started getting more depressed. But I think the psychosis really began with when I started to think that I started to get this weird belief in my head that my family was at risk of acting on the thoughts in my head. So that's not something
Mm.
that's possible to be true. Like nobody else can act on the thoughts in your head because nobody knows what thoughts are in your head. But for some reason, I started to think that, okay, I don't think I will act on these thoughts because, I love my baby. I would never act on these thoughts. But then I started to believe, like, oh my God, maybe my family will act on the thoughts in my head. And so that is no longer an intrusive thought because that's something that's like a belief that can't possibly be true and not grounded in reality, right?
Yeah.
So I think that was the beginning of my psychosis when I started to believe these bizarre things. It started with that. And because of that, I became hyper protective over my daughter. I wouldn't let my mom or anybody be alone with her, because now I was worried that they would do something to her. And then from there, things started spiraling worse, and I started to believe all sorts of bizarre things. I started to think at one point that maybe my baby wasn't really a baby, but she was like a grown adult in a baby's body pretending to be a baby. I know that sounds super
Mm,
weird, but
mm.
my mind came to that conclusion, and that was like really bothering me, because I was like, why are you acting like a baby when we both know you're not? And I don't know. There were certain
Wow.
things that
Yeah.
made me believe it at that time, and I can laugh about it now, but I really did believe it.
Yeah.
And then I had other delusions that then for some reason I heard some kind of study, and then I concluded that my daughter was autistic. Then I started to think that my husband was having an affair with a coworker. Then I started to believe that my husband wanted to molest our daughter. And I think that in that first episode of postpartum psychosis, I would say that that was the most terrifying delusion I had, that I thought he wanted to molest my daughter. And because of it, these are not just like random thoughts. These are like real beliefs, and so when a person believes certain things, they act in accordance with that. And I was acting in accordance with what I believed. So I was taking my daughter to the doctors, like looking for an autism diagnosis. I was not letting my mother and my sisters and everybody have access to my baby, because I believed they would harm her. And because I believed my husband wanted to molest my daughter, I remember one day while he was driving on the highway, I was so enraged at the thought that he wanted to molest her. I started punching him in the head while he was driving the
Mm.
highway, because I was so like disgusted and angry, and you know what I mean? So that those were all because of the delusions that I had. And so things just kept progressing, and my husband definitely saw that I was acting off, like especially being punched in the head while he was driving and stuff. He took me to the doctor twice, and I didn't really have words to explain what I was going through, because I believed all these things. So why would I complain about the things? You know what I mean? I believe they were
Yeah.
true, and
Yep.
I believe that they were like family problems. So I just went in and basically was like, my husband was like, she's not acting like herself. And I was basically like, yeah, I'm miserable. And both times, like, I was sent home, just told, motherhood is rough, you'll feel better. And so I never got help that time. And all I just remember is that I believed all these things, and then, my family tried to figure out what was wrong with me. I got upset with them. I ran off. And then there's like this chunk of time that I have no memory of what exactly happened. There's like a period of like 1 month where I can't really say I know what happened in that month, but all I know is that one day I just woke up. I was back to my and my baby was like 4 months old. I was back to my normal baseline, and all I kind of knew was that my husband didn't have a job anymore because he was at home taking care of us. And I just remember being like, why the hell did I think all those weird things? You know what I mean? And that was my first experience of postpartum psychosis.
Wow. Yeah, wow. So are you saying that you were sort of cured without treatment?
Yes. And I really
Mm.
want to point out that that is an extremely dangerous thing, because
Mm.
that experience my psychiatrist has explained to me is why my postpartum psychosis was like a million times worse than that first episode, because my mind was allowed to be in that land of psychosis for like 4 months untreated. So that is what set me up for like a hellish postpartum psychosis the second time, only without even having finished a full pregnancy. So that's extremely dangerous, and nobody should ever think like, oh, this can go away by itself,
Yes,
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, good to say. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so tell us about that second experience.
Yeah, so because of my first experience, which in a lot of people's cases, like a lot of people's postpartum psychosis cases don't even get as bad as it did the first time. And I'm considering my first episode as mild, but most people would say that that's a pretty intense psychosis episode if you really thought that, your husband was going to molest your child and
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff. But I consider that mild because of what happened to me the second time. And so even after what happened to me the first time, and even though I spontaneously got better after 4 months, I was terrified. Like, I couldn't understand why I believed all these weird things, and why I remembered the way I had behaved. I remember punching my husband in the head and the other things that I said and did. And so I was like so confused, and I was like, what was that? I didn't have a name to describe what had happened. So even though I'd always wanted more children, I was like, no way, man. I don't want to get pregnant again because I don't know what that was about. And so I refused. My husband was like, do you want more kids? I was like, no way. And so I did not want to have more children. But then what happened is like, I started like researching, reading about things. And this was over 20 years ago. So
Yeah.
postpartum mood disorders were not really on the radar at that time as much as they are now. So it was through reading that I came across postpartum depression. And so I read about it and I was like, wait, some of this matches what happened to me. So some of it didn't, but the fact that it was like described like women feeling down, exhausted, all that kind of stuff matched with me. And even though all the symptoms didn't align, I still concluded that maybe I had suffered from postpartum depression. So I kind of self diagnosed myself and said, that's maybe what happened to me. And, as my friends went on to have more children, I kind of was like, okay, maybe now that I know I had postpartum depression, maybe it's okay if I get pregnant. And so I got pregnant, and I was pregnant for about 14 weeks when I started spotting. And then I found out I had experienced a missed miscarriage, which means that, you have technically miscarried, but the fetus hasn't left your body. So your body doesn't know that your pregnancy is over. And so when I found that out, I was told that my body would release the baby in due time. And so about 2 weeks later, after I found out, my body did release my baby. And in that time, from learning about my miscarriage to when my body did release my baby, I had enough time to grieve over it. And I like to consider myself a religious person. So I made peace about it. And I was like, okay, I trust God. And it didn't mean that I wasn't sad, but I was able to make peace about it. Right.
Sure.
And so after my body released the baby, I felt like my normal self. Like, I was okay. And then about 5 days later, I suddenly felt like I was in this serious depressive pit. And it was
Mm.
like from feeling normal to just being in this pit. So I was like, what's going on with me? And I couldn't understand why I was feeling like this. And at the same time, like I'd mentioned, I had no previous mental health history. So I remembered, I was like, the only time in my life when I've ever felt like this is after my first pregnancy. So I said, what, like, this reminds me of how I felt right after I gave birth. So I went right away to my doctor and I told her, like, I'm not feeling like myself. I'm feeling really depressed and I don't know why, and all this kind of stuff. And the doctor was like, oh, you just had a miscarriage. It's grief. And she dismissed me. But I was like, I
Mm.
told her, I said, I don't feel like it's grief. I feel like I did have time to grieve. But she was like, nope, it's grief. Go home. Right. And so I continued to worsen. And I started like ruminating I started having these like ruminating thoughts about like just mundane thoughts that felt like stuck in my head. And that started making me depressed even more because I was like, why am I having these thoughts that I can't seem to control? So I went back to the doctor, and the doctor said, oh, cut yourself some slack. You'll be fine. So, doctor, as my second visit to the doctor was all,
Oh
I was
dear.
absolutely missed.
Not great,
Eh,
is it?
yeah. And
Yeah.
so then I started to kind of feel like I was starting to experience bizarre thoughts. And by bizarre thoughts, I mean, like, I started to have these thoughts in my head that, like, maybe my daughter needed to die so she could go to heaven. Because if she didn't die, maybe she'd grow up to become a criminal. And even though I was having these thoughts play out in my head, I was like, I don't agree with those thoughts. Like, where are they
Mm.
coming from? So they were really starting to frighten me. So I went and I saw a different doctor. And these are all doctors that I knew. They're not random doctors. They're like my primary care provider, the doctor who took care of me, the OB that took care of me when I was pregnant, a psychologist I had seen in my life. They're all people that know me in my normal
Have
baseline,
you have a history with you. Yeah, they know your
Yeah.
profile. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went to a psychologist then, and the psychologist listened to me and he said, well, I think you're having intrusive thoughts. And that was the first time I heard the term intrusive
Mm.
thoughts. And he explained them to me and he said, oh, like take warm showers, soak your feet, do like herbal baths and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and sent me home. So I was like, okay. And then things kept worsening, and I began to kind of feel like there was a voice telling me distressing things, like telling me horrible things that I didn't like your husband's going to leave you, all these kinds of stuff. So I went back for a fourth visit to a doctor, and I basically told the doctor, I'm hearing voices. Is that okay to be
Mm.
heard? Because something in my mind told me that it's not okay to hear voices. But I was sent home. And the doctor didn't even, I asked, should I take like medication or whatever? And she said, no, I think you're coping fine. So I was sent home. Things continued to worsen. And I got to the point where I started thinking that, like, well, I don't think I'm responsible for these thoughts. I don't think they're my voices. And I concluded that they were from the devil. And I started to
Mm.
think that there was this apocalyptic battle for control of my mind between God and the devil. And I wanted to go. I took a fifth visit to the doctor, and while I was at this visit at the doctor, I heard voices, like the voice was telling me to stab my daughter to death,
Mm.
and then it was telling me to push people that were walking in front of me into traffic and kill them. And then at the same time, it was also saying, like, you should kill yourself too, because you don't want to be a bad person. And it was telling me to do other awful things. And I was terrified. I was so terrified because I wasn't just hearing these things. I also felt like I was being pushed towards these people, like as if there was a tangible force pushing, propelling me, which was really horrific because
Yeah, how
I did not,
frightening.
yeah, I did
Mm.
not want to do these things. So when I went to the doctor, I told her this. I said, like, I want to be hospitalized because I'm feeling like doing bad things to people. They're evil things, and I don't want to do them. And because I feel like doing these evil things, I want to do bad things to myself. And the doctor literally looked at me and she said, no, I think you're having a panic attack, and prescribed me the tiniest possible dose of an antidepressant, a huge dose of an anti-anxiety medication, and sent me home.
Oh
And
gosh.
yeah, and that
It's
was
a
like
kind
the,
of unbelievable, isn't it?
yeah,
It's
it's very unbelievable. The only
mm.
good thing that came out of that appointment was the fact that she decided to make a referral for me to see a psychiatrist, which happened a
Mm.
week later.
Okay.
And so 1 week after that, only God knows how I was able to prevent myself from acting on all those homicidal and suicidal thoughts and urges I was experiencing. I think I think part of that was due to the fact that I was given such a high dose of an anti-anxiety medication that it made me feel so lethargic and heavy that I could barely move. Like it kind of
Mm.
made me catatonic. And so by the time then I eventually got to see that psychiatrist, and it was her that diagnosed me with postpartum psychosis, and she retroactively diagnosed me with having experienced it the first time as well. And it was the antipsychotic medication that she put me on that took me out of my psychosis. And about 3 months after I started, I came off of my medication, and I never looked back.
So that was the end of it. It didn't come out in any other ways at other points in your life. That was
Never.
where it ended. Yeah.
Yes, it's like my doctor told me. She's like, it seems like you're kind of allergic to the postpartum period. Obviously, that's not exactly the thing, but she just laughs and
Yes.
says, "You're like, I've never," and that was like over now. That would be about almost 18 years ago. My second experience with it, and the only two times in my life I've ever felt like that was both times when I was postpartum. Mm.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things from what you've said. It's thank you for sharing so bravely, and
Oh
it's
no problem.
invaluable information for there would be a lot of women that would be listening keenly and thinking, okay, I'm not. There's nothing. I'm not mad. There is help. I'm not alone.
Mhm.
Um, and it's how did you feel when she said you have postpartum psychosis? Did that
Well,
feel like a relief to you,
She
or
didn't. She didn't exact what she said was that by the time I got to see her, I was so far gone into my delusions now. I had developed new delusions, and part of the delusion was that this is a spiritual apocalyptic battle between God and the devil, and you can't let the psychiatrist know about it because she won't understand. So I was now, whereas before when I was going in, I had some insight. So I was telling them I was hearing voices. I was telling them I was feeling like, a force was forcing me to do bad things. But by the time I got to the psychiatrist, I was keeping a lot of it inside of me because now I believe that I shouldn't be sharing it because of a new delusion that I was having. But so she didn't come out and say you have postpartum psychosis. What she said was that listening to what happened to you after your first pregnancy, I feel like you had psychosis with that pregnant with in that postpartum period. And even though right now you're not answering questions in a way that I can definitively say you're psychotic, I feel like you might be, and I want to stave off a dangerous psychotic episode. So I'm going to start you on the smallest dose of an antipsychotic. And of course,
Mm.
that wasn't enough. But as soon as I heard the word antipsychotic, like the antipsychotic thing, I started crying and saying, like, you're hurting my feelings by calling me crazy and stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I didn't think anything, like, I realized that there was something wrong with me, but I believed all my delusions. So even though I was like, there's something wrong with me, I didn't think it was that I had lost my mind. So I did start the medication even though I felt like, oh, my feelings are hurt, but my symptoms kept progressing even on that tiny dose, that I started seeing like dead corpses. I started thinking that the walls were talking to me and trying to communicate the devil's messages to me and was going to force me to hurt people. And so I kept calling her. I had her number and I kept calling her, like screaming like, oh my god, this is happening and that's happening. And so she kept upping my medications, and I initially started off on like a dose of 30 milligrams of the antipsychotic, and and eventually I got to the point of taking 300 milligrams of it, and that's when my psychosis broke and cleared.
Right. Did you have to be admitted? Was this something that
No, no, my doctor
no.
had told me you should have been admitted from the get-go, but
Yes.
because she had initially she thought that she was just warding off a psychotic episode, and then she kept upping, and then at the point that she realized, oh my gosh, this woman is like acutely psychotic. Fortunately, the medication amount that she had given me broke my psychosis very quickly.
Yeah, amazing. So how long would you say it took, did you say?
You mean to get to the right dose?
Yeah, and then to finally get the freedom of not having the psychotic episodes.
Yeah, so basically I started, I think, over 7 days. Like from the moment I met her, she gave me like 30 milligrams, and then over 7 days she increased it to 300 milligrams.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
But
psychotic.
that wow, that really shows though how quickly this can be resolved if
Oh yeah.
you have
And
the
then
right treatment.
yeah,
Yeah.
and by the time I was on, like, I mean, at 30 milligrams, like, yeah, I was still experiencing problems. But then as the dosages kept getting higher, some of my symptoms, like the urge to harm people and stuff, went. But then the delusions were still there. Like, I still thought that the devil was controlling me and stuff like that. But at 300, I would say, like, within like a day or two, I started like feeling like so much better. And then, like I said, 3 months of being on it, like within like 1 month, I was fully like stabilized. And then I started weaning off, and I weaned off completely by the end of 3 months from
Yeah,
my,
okay. Yep.
yeah. And
That's
so
so
why
good.
did I suffer for so long when there's medication that could like
Yeah.
eradicate like this?
Yeah, and of course, it shouldn't have to be such a battle to get to that point. I mean, you're a very good advocate. You didn't give up you advocated for yourself because it sounds as though deep down you knew that this was not right. There was something not wrong and you needed some medical support with this. But
Yeah, and
um,
I was thinking more like, I'm so terrified. Like, I believed that I was in this apocalyptic battle, but my thing was like, I'm so terrified of this reality that I need medications to calm me down. I didn't realize that the apocalyptic battle was not true. I was more like, I need medications to calm me down and accept this bizarre reality that's my life?
yes, yeah, I got you. But whichever way it comes, it was there to help and it was get
For
you
sure.
out of this. But and it's not funny by all means, but
No, no. In hindsight, I can laugh about it, but it's like laugh in an uncomfortable way type of thing?
of course, I can't even imagine. So, probably circling back to those delusions and beliefs, it sounds as though, correct me if I'm wrong, initially you have the beliefs, but you understand that they're not logical. is that right or rational? And then eventually you just start believing them, and you cannot separate reality
I
from
don't
not real. How
in
does that
in my,
work?
in my case it was like that. In my first experience with postpartum psychosis, I believed all the delusion. I didn't even
Right.
have that there. So I think it's different in the second time I had it. I had more of an insight initially and then lost it. So like I know people will say like, "Oh, psychosis means you have no insight." I don't think it means you don't have it. You might not have an insight, but or you might have insight in some aspects of it, but not others. Like I knew something was wrong with me, but
Yes.
my conclusion about what was wrong was
Yeah.
inaccurate.
It's
Like
not,
but the
yeah,
first time
rational.
I had no sense that anything was wrong with me. So I think it can go
Mm.
like either you have completely no sense at all, or you can have aspects where you have some insight into and then parts that you don't have insight into.
Yeah, I get that feeling that there are moments of clarity and there are moments of like, there's something really wrong here. I don't like what I'm thinking. And then, of
Mhm,
course, there's other times where that's just not possible.
mhm, and that
A little excerpt from your book, which I'll mention it towards the end, but you said that first time that you came out of the hospital when you were just kind of left with, I think without medication, nothing, just kind of sent away or something, or you had medication, but they really didn't have a clue what was going on. You
mm.
said to your husband, "Am I a good person, Adam? Am I a good person?" You asked everyone you saw that entire day on the first day that you'd been sent home from the hospital for whatever was plaguing me. How did you feel in the moment asking that?
Well, the reason I was asking that was what that was the time that I was sent home with that tiny dose of antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication. And so I was just trying to make sense of the fact like I was like, well, like I wanted to be hospitalized and they basically said that I could go home and just take some antidepressant, anti-anxiety.
Yeah,
And I knew antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication was for feeling sad or anxious. So I was just like, well, my problem is like I'm having feelings of doing like bad things to people. Like I'm having evil feelings. So then I was trying to rationalize like so is that happening because I'm a bad person? So I was checking to see what other people thought. Was I a bad person? Like am I a good person? Am I a good because I wanted to understand where these things were coming from?
yeah, I can understand what you're saying. Yeah, so you thought, if I'm not truly, truly unwell, what
Yeah.
does this actually mean about my character?
That's right. Because if I'm being sent home with antidepressants to make me feel happy and medication to calm me down, like, well, maybe this is because I'm a bad person. So I was trying to like figure out like, am I a bad person? Am I a good person? Like, what am I? I'm trying to figure out my character to understand where this was coming from?
Absolutely. And as mothers, I think it's a very default thing that we do. We always, when something doesn't feel right, we shift the blame inwards as well. And we
Hmm.
think it has something to do with us as a mother or just a human being.
Hmm.
But how honest were you with your family and those around you, and how did they manage and cope through this time?
Well, I was honest. I did tell. I At one point I told my dad what I was seeing, and I remember he looked at me like I was a monster. And I think it was because of the fact that they were getting mixed messages. Like I
Yeah,
was they looking at me, they were like something is seriously wrong. They could see that something was seriously wrong with me, the way I was behaving and everything. But then the doctors kept sending me home, which kind of suggested that there was nothing wrong with me. So they were getting like super confused, mixed messages.
of course.
Their
Yeah.
gut was telling them that something was wrong. But when like five different doctors send you home and basically say that you're doing fine and coping actually well, like then that confuses, right?
Yeah.
And that's why
Yeah.
I'm so big about awareness because I literally saw how it impacted the way my family was responding to me, everything. The way I viewed what was happening to me myself, how my family was responding to me, everything. Like because we look to doctors and healthcare providers as like the gods of knowing about health.
Yeah, yeah, and these were doctors and people that you trusted. So you yeah, exactly. It's and as you said, like there was much less awareness then. I also had a child in the year 2000, and And, even the word postpartum to this day is still very confusing to people. I feel people use this word, which, postpartum literally means after birth. So I'd argue that we're always postpartum because we're always after birth. But
Mm.
I feel that people use the word to explain like interchangeably with depression or
Mm.
anxiety or mood. They say, "Oh, she had postpartum."
Hmm.
So there's still a lot of confusion and lack of awareness, isn't there? Even to
Yeah.
this day, would you
Oh,
say? And why do you
definitely.
think that we don't have more awareness now? Do you think it's getting better?
I don't know. I would have liked to have thought that things would change, but I don't know if you're familiar with a case that recently happened just like last year or 2 years ago. There was a case in Boston, Massachusetts, where a labor and delivery nurse, she took the lives of her three children, and she's believed
Mm.
had postpartum psychosis. And like me, she went to five different doctors.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd like to think that, but if you look at a lot of stories where mothers have taken the lives of their children, a lot of their stories parallel mine, where they have gone multiple times to seek help and they're dismissed. So there's
Mm.
just, like so much ignorance about this condition. And I think, yeah, like that's what's at the root of the problem, that healthcare providers are not getting themselves educated about it because they like to tell themselves that it's rare when it's not. And
Mm.
that's part of the problem. That when you think something is rare, you think that you don't really have to know about it because it's never going to really come up in your practice, right?
Yeah, that's true. And how rare is it? Tell us what
It's
actually the reality is.
it's not rare at all, unless of course you think Down syndrome and cerebral palsy are rare, because it
Okay.
actually occurs at a higher incidence than those two conditions. And the other thing too is that the statistic is said to be 1 to 2 in every 1,000 live births. So what you need to remember is that they're only talking about the incidence after live birth. So my second episode would not even be counted in that statistic because I didn't give birth to a live baby. Next
Mm.
of all, that statistic is based on women that actually get admitted to the hospital and treated. So neither of my two cases would have even made it into that statistic.
Yes, wow.
Medically.
So that puts it in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just how rare it is, inverted commas.
Hmm.
What are some of the other misconceptions about this illness?
Um, I think that the big misconceptions out there is that, oh, like, you know what, we shouldn't be talking about it because it'll frighten women, I don't know, into developing it. But you can't be frightened into developing postpartum psychosis. You can't be frightened into having a child with Down syndrome. You can't be frightened into having a child with cerebral palsy. You can't frighten a woman into developing postpartum psychosis. And for so long, we just refuse to talk about postpartum psychosis openly because we're so scared that we'll frighten women into, I don't know, developing it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's crazy when
So,
you think of it that way, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think another one of the biggest misconceptions is that people tend to think that women with postpartum psychosis are somehow different from other moms, and like there's been like this idea that they kind of agree with their psychotic thoughts, and there's always been this wrong teaching that, like, oh, women with OCD are disturbed by their thoughts and women with psychosis are not disturbed by their thoughts. But that's not true. Like, women
Mm.
with postpartum psychosis are disturbed by their thoughts, right? Or can be disturbed by their thoughts. Just because they sometimes have committed harm doesn't mean that it's because they agreed with their thoughts. It's because sometimes they could feel compelled to do things that they didn't want to do. Like that's what happened with me, right? Like I was feeling like I was being forced to do things I didn't want, and that's why I was begging to be hospitalized. There are
Yes.
tons of women with that same story. They begged to be hospitalized and they were sent home. Do you think? And then, unlike me, they did kill their infants, right? But the fact that they were begging to be hospitalized, do you think they wanted to kill their infants? No, they probably didn't want to. But this illness can make you like develop delusions and hallucinations that are feeling that make you feel like you have no choice but to do certain things, or it warps your mind into believing that you're doing something that's actually like oh, I'm helping, like the thought, that bizarre thought in my head that was saying your daughter's going to turn into a criminal, so it's better to send her to heaven right now, right?
Yeah, so in your own way, you're still coming from that place of wanting what's in the best interest of your child.
Exactly. Or you're feeling compelled and forced because of these bizarre symptoms that
Mm.
are biological symptoms of this condition. And the fact that they're biological symptoms of this condition is so evident by the fact that when you get medication to treat it, it goes away.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
it's not
Mm.
like you have to be talked out of of doing these things. It's like the minute you get proper medication into your system, those things no longer exist. Those messed up thoughts and stuff. So I think for too long there's been this belief that moms that have committed harm to their themselves or their infants were acting because like they wanted to do these things, and that's so wrong, because and that's why my book is called A Mom Like That, because I've heard people literally, like, if I check up on people, like, a lot of times they don't know my history, but when I do the postpartum work that I do and I check up on moms or whatever, they'll be like, yeah, I'm feeling like overwhelmed, or I'm feeling like mom, but I'm not like a mom like that, like a mom like Andrea Yates, or they'll cite somebody who's done something like tragic. And
Yeah.
my thing is like, well, they are moms like you. They were just really sick and didn't get the help they needed, you know?
Yes, yes, that's a great reframe. My heart goes out to those mums that,
Sure.
have done some of these things that are very tragic,
Hmm.
but also because they were so ill, and they're villainized, aren't they, and made to feel like there's something evil about them.
That's right. And the
Yeah.
reality of the situation is that you yourself, anybody, your sister, your mother, anybody could have been in that situation.
Mm.
And made the only difference between people that had postpartum psychosis and did commit harm versus those that didn't was that they didn't get the proper care that they needed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So some women with postpartum depression, for instance, can that progress to postpartum psychosis?
Okay, so this is an interesting question. So typically we don't say that postpartum depression progresses to postpartum psychosis. They're two different conditions. The problem really lies in the fact that the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, which is like the Bible from which you take out like diagnoses, like, okay, bipolar is in there,
Mhm.
depression is in there, type of thing. There is postpartum psychosis as a separate entity does not exist. It's usually exists as like a specifier. So they'll take something like bipolar and say this person has bipolar with psychotic features and postpartum onset. Do you follow what I'm saying? Like, it
I
doesn't exist
do. So are they
as.
diagnosed with bipolar? If Is that usually the way it goes?
Yeah, so typically most vast majority of people with diagnosed with postpartum, like, you can't get a formal diagnosis of postpartum psychosis. You get, like, people they'll look at your symptoms and say, well, this person has a lot of mania. So then they'll say this person has bipolar postpartum onset if it developed
Yeah,
in,
right.
and then they'll say with psychotic features. So from in my case, it was major depressive disorder because I had no mania. I had no symptoms of mania. I was just severely depressed. And then it was postpartum onset because I never had depression before being postpartum. And
Yeah.
then with psychotic features, it's actually a very different type of depression than postpartum depression. So it's
Yes.
not like postpartum depression like anybody's postpartum depression will develop psychotic features. It's like severe depression, like very severe. Like, if you read my book, you'll see, like, I was not able to, like, move. Like, it's like a severe level of depression
Mhm.
that has the propensity to develop psychotic features.
Yes, okay.
Does that kind of make
Do
sense?
you feel like that the label should be changed? Do you feel like that adequately describes what's happening to you, or do you feel like they're just kind of trying to, not really giving it the honor that it needs, it is a condition in itself?
I definitely agree with. There's a proposal right now with a bunch of researchers that are saying that postpartum psychosis should be put as its own entity into the
Mm.
DSM, and I completely agree with that, because it is very unique. Like, it's very different from any type of other psychotic illnesses like schizophrenia or even regular bipolar that can have psychotic elements to it. It's very, very different. Like um it is a known risk factor. Postpartum psychosis has a real risk of infanticide and suicide. It's always a psychiatric emergency. Schizophrenia, bipolar, they're not psychiatric emergencies, but postpartum psychosis is because of the intense acute nature of it. And so it definitely does need its own diagnosis. But I do believe that the form that I was told that I had, which is major depressive, like as per the language currently in the DSM, major depressive disorder with psychotic features, does accurately represent what I had, because I had like the five symptoms of depression that have to be there, and I had hallucinations and delusions. So it summed
Yes.
it up. Mine's is summed up accurately by my specific diagnosis. Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even postpartum depression doesn't isn't the same as clinical depression in a non-pregnant or a
Yeah.
non-postpartum woman. You know, it's
It's
just
more.
I think there needs to be a lot of review of how we word these things and take away the stigma as well of maybe a woman thinking she's got a mental illness for life. You know?
For sure.
Yeah, yeah. And also a woman that's had postpartum psychosis or psychotic episodes, was she is it very likely that she will have that again in subsequent pregnancies or postpartum? Or could she
They
maybe not ever have it again?
they do say that there is a 50% increased risk of developing it with a second pregnancy,
Mhm.
but and that's why they always say that if you've had one experience of postpartum psychosis, you should be with a psychiatrist for your second one, so that they can either prophylactically treat you, or you're having like a wait and see approach with a psychiatrist.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. So
So
maybe it's taken a little bit more seriously if you've already experienced it. The doctors might then, say, "Okay, well, let's keep a special eye on this woman."
And in my case, because I had it the first time and the second time, I was specifically told, like, not only would I be prophylactically treated, my psychiatrist was like, we're going to put you inpatient from like the last few days of your pregnancy. We're going to start you on medications like ASAP after you deliver. You will not be allowed to, I would recommend that you not breastfeed, because we want to make sure you sleep properly. Like, because I had it twice already, she was like, upping what was expected of me for a third pregnancy. But my family was so traumatized by everything that happened to me. Even at least I got therapy for the trauma that I went through. But my
Yeah.
family was traumatized, and they were like, "No, never. We'll all run away from you if you get pregnant again."
Oh, dear. Yeah, because it would have been a whole family,
Mhm.
crisis, wouldn't it? Like, the family around you must have been going a little bit crazy, wondering,
Oh,
"How come we can get you this support? There's something really wrong here." So it
yeah.
must have been very frustrating and really, like, trying at times.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, I'm so
Mm.
grateful that my family stuck around with me and supported me as much as they did, especially since they didn't have the benefit of me being in hospital. So they were doing the like 24-hour supervision, having to deal with, it's incredibly difficult to help someone that is having such a serious, like it's an emergency, right? Like, and they're having to take care of me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And you had all the help, so it kind of takes away that myth that, oh, it's just because that woman isn't supported or she hasn't got a village around her or she's not being fed well or,
Oh,
even with all of those things, it's
yeah.
not kind of a prevention is better than cure sort of illness, is it? It can
Oh no,
happen
it
to
isn't.
anybody. Yeah.
Oh, yes. And there's more of a, out of all the postpartum mood and anxiety disorders out there, what's acknowledged is that all of them, like, you have a greater propensity toward developing postpartum depression or anxiety or OCD when there's stress going on in your life or not enough support. But
Correct.
they
Yeah.
have research shows that that's not as connected to why somebody develops postpartum psychosis. Like, it's more of a biologically based illness, that they think there's like some kind of a switch in a person that just goes off. And
Yes.
it doesn't
Mm.
necessarily go off in a second pregnancy, which is why there's only a 50% risk and not like an 80% risk. And
Right.
then my story, like that's one thing that like I hope really comes out in my story. I had great support the first time. And
Mm.
then people say, well, taking care of a baby is so overwhelming. The second time I didn't even have a baby to take care of.
Yeah, that's amazing that it still happened even without a
Yeah.
full-term baby even. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it had nothing to do with like, oh, I'm feeling overwhelmed or like, I'm not able to sleep because I was fully able to sleep, but my mind would not allow me because of the illness that I had, right? So a lot of times, I mean, I think doulas are amazing and everybody should have doulas and everything. But sometimes when people are like, oh, you just have to protect your sleep, it's like, yeah, but it wasn't that my sleep wasn't protected. It was that literally the illness didn't allow me to sleep.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And so
That
that's why
must be very mentally draining and awful not being able to sleep, you
Oh
know?
my gosh. And that's why my doctor part of when she said like if you want a third baby, she said we'd put you inpatient. We would, medicate you immediately. You would not be allowed to breastfeed because we're going to put you on medication that forces you to sleep
Yeah, yeah,
because she knew
absolutely.
like what like it's not like I love sleeping. Like it's not that I didn't have time. I was nursing a baby and that's why I couldn't sleep or anything. That it was just that like the illness didn't allow me to sleep. Like I needed to be medicated to sleep. You know.
Yeah, it's a very cruel symptom of it, isn't it? And is that
Mhm.
simply because your mind just can't it's so hypervigilant it can't shut down?
No, I didn't feel like because there was nothing
Right.
for me to be hypervigilant around with the miscarriage.
Yeah,
Like
that's true.
I had
Yeah.
no reason to be hypervigilant, right?
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's obviously something to do with biological change, as you
Yeah,
said.
definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
for
Yeah, thank you for giving so much clarity on that and really, getting that message out there that this can happen to your average, normal,
Mhm.
inverted commas, mum that is your cousin, is your sister, is the lady next door. It can really be, there doesn't have to be any warning or any pre existing conditions. You can have
No.
all the support, but this is something that can happen or affect really any
Yes.
woman. And it's not so common, but it's also not rare. And I think that's
No.
a message we need to get out there too, is that it's okay to talk about this as being something that could happen. It's a
Yes.
way that we also just get educated and then
Mhm.
are able to look at other mothers, especially those that might have experienced things without the prejudice. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So what would you say, like, if we've got a couple, family, w and they're kind of a bit worried about where the mum's thoughts are going or what she's starting to, have delusions or, different things that she feels like is not just normal baby blues. What would the
Mhm.
family be looking out for? When would they be concerned, and what would be the course of action to take?
So, if an individual themselves or family notices that the person is reporting seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling things that are objectively not there and that nobody else is able to sense,
Mhm.
you should take them to the emergency room ASAP. It does not matter if it's a small hallucination or a big one, because, and I'll give an example. Like sometimes people are like, I've talked to people and they're like, well, my loved one seems to be hallucinating. Yeah, they're saying this and this, but it's not violent. And I'll be like, it doesn't matter if it's violent. They have lost touch with reality
Yeah.
if they are seeing, hearing, or smelling things. And here's an example. Like believing like in terms of a delusion, right? Like sometimes people say they believe strange things, but it's not, they don't believe anything violent. But if I was believing that I could fly, that's not a violent delusion, but I could still end up dead if I try to take a flight off of a building, or if I try to fly with my child strapped to my um chest. You know what I mean? The delusion or
Totally.
hallucination doesn't need to be violent to
Right.
end in tragedy. So if family notices or hears that their loved one is reporting seeing, hearing, smelling things that are not there in the postpartum period, I'm talking about specifically, if they find that their loved one is espousing strange beliefs that that they've never espoused before, any new kind of religiosity,
Yep.
Like they're an atheist and now all of a sudden they're reading the Bible every day or reading the Quran or whatever. Like all of that kind of stuff, take them. It might be reflective of a delusion, right? And a lot of times somebody that's having hallucinations and delusions might not tell them to their
Yes.
loved ones. They might not even be aware that nobody else is seeing what they're seeing. So what I always tell people is like in the literature, like I mean, if somebody reports hallucinations or delusions, that's when they need emergency help, right? But I always tell family, um, if your loved one is behaving bizarrely, I would take
Mm.
them to a
Mm.
healthcare provider because often the response of a person that is experiencing hallucinations and delusions will appear bizarre to outsiders, right? Like for me, there was a moment that like when I was hearing voices, I was running around with my fingers stuffed into my ears because I didn't want to hear the voices.
Mm.
Now, I wasn't telling my family I was hearing voices, but they if you ask them, was she behaving bizarrely? They'd be like, yeah, she's like walking up and down the street with her fingers stuffed in her ears.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
is bizarre behavior. And then another time, like when I thought I was seeing the devil in front of me, I was trying to punch and kick the devil. Now, for me, what I was doing made sense because I see the devil in front of me. I'm trying to punch and kick him. But to my family, they just saw me like trying to punch like thin air, right? So that looked very bizarre to them. So I always tell families like, do not ignore bizarre behavior in the postpartum period. Um, and don't be shy to report it to the healthcare provider. Don't feel like you're preserving that person's dignity because you're not. Because you, by you sharing that information with a healthcare, that can mean the difference between life and death for that person.
Yeah, it's that serious, isn't it?
Oh, it is very serious. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good to know. So, I think because I think a lot of is kind of watered down in the postpartum, or they're just acting a bit crazy because of baby brain, or they've the lack of sleep is making her wild, or something like this. But that's really quite an eye opener. That
Yeah.
don't ignore these things, even
Yeah.
if you're
Don't.
wrong. It's better to be wrong than
Right.
err on the side of caution than to have a tragedy happen.
That's right.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
And oftentimes when you read about these, well, like even with my family, like if you had asked my family at any point, like, do you think she was hallucinating? My family would have said no because I wasn't telling them what I was seeing, for the most part, and except for like one instance when I was sharing my thoughts. But the hallucinations, I was not telling anybody what they were. And and if you asked my family, do you think she was delusional? They would have said no. But if you said, was she engaging in bizarre behavior? They would have been like 1,000%. They would have told you like half a
Yeah.
dozen ways that I was behaving bizarrely. And I was behaving bizarrely in each of those situations because of a hallucination or delusion. Like I would say, I
Yeah.
was not behaving bizarrely. I was punching him in the head because he was a child molester. I was punching and kicking the devil that time. Like you know what I mean? I had
Yeah.
reason for what I was doing, but they couldn't see it because it was because of my reality. You know?
Yeah, and is that you're not saying because you feel shameful, or because, like you were saying, you actually believe that they're in on it
It
and they're
wasn't
going to
because
act on
no,
that?
it no no. In terms of the hallucinations, it was like I wasn't even processing the fact that they weren't seeing it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm, mm,
Like I remember at one time when my husband was trying to put like when he saw me punching and kicking because I was screaming because I thought I saw the devil and I felt like the devil was trying to make me do something I didn't want to do. So I was punching and kicking at it and screaming. And my husband's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I remember thinking in my head, "Why doesn't my husband want me to get rid of the devil?"
yeah, yeah,
Like I wasn't even processing like this is like a heightened frightening thing for me, so I wasn't even thinking like is he able to see it. I was just like, why doesn't he want me to stop him? Like you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. What did he think was wrong with you?
He just was like he didn't know what was wrong with me, but he was like there's something seriously wrong with you. I don't know what it is.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
he wouldn't have been able to say, but he just knew that he was the only person that was fully convinced. And no, like my parents and my siblings, like each time the doctors were like, oh no, she's fine, like they were like, okay, kind of maybe she is fine, you know what I mean? But my husband, none of what the doctor said sat well with him. He was just like convinced that I needed some medications. He was like, there's definitely something wrong
Yeah.
with
He
me, you
probably
know?
thought, "They're not seeing what I'm seeing," you know? And yeah, he would have thought he would have questioned his own sanity at times, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh dear. Yeah, thank you. It's been an amazing conversation and you've been so generous with your sharing.
Oh, no
So,
problem.
I think a nice thing to ask is a mother who has been through any of these mood disorders, but particularly the most serious one, postpartum psychosis, can she go on to have a natural bond with her baby and live a normal life?
I think so. I think there's tons of women who have. I feel like I'm one of those women. Like aside from those two experiences, which were pretty severe, like my own psychiatrist, I said, "How much worse could it have gotten?" She said, "Are you kidding me? Like, I mean, it's a miracle that you didn't hurt somebody. You know what I mean? From how long you were left with it." But I've gone on to have a completely normal life. If you met me, you would never ever think that I experienced anything like that. Vast majority of the people that I know have no clue that I went through something like this.
Mm. Mm.
Like probably like 0.01% of the people around me know that I experienced this illness.
Yeah, and that's a really good thing to say as well because as you've said with your a mum like that, you know, we could be looking at a mum like that and not even know it.
Yeah.
It's just yeah, very yeah, it's great to know that women can go on to they can be treated and go on to live normal healthy lives and have a beautiful family relationship.
Oh yeah.
Because I think maybe that is part of the fear is that this is going to be my stigma for life and I'm never gonna live a normal life after
Oh,
it.
oh yeah, and even in my book I say that like when my doctor told me that she was going to put me on antipsychotics, I started to cry and said, "You're hurting my feelings." And I literally wrote in there, I felt like she had stamped the words life over on my forehead. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I thought that, but it's so far from the truth. I'm actually grateful that I experienced this. I would not want it to happen to anybody, but I'm grateful because I've been able to help people. I've been able to spread awareness. So I'm actually grateful for the experience that good can come out of it. You know?
Yeah.
Nobody needs to be afraid of I can be sure this illness is very terrifying, but I feel like nobody needs to get to have it go to the point that it did with me. And that happened because of ignorance. When people are aware of it, when families are aware of it, and I have to say, I am like super big on doulas and lactation consultants knowing about this illness because they work so closely with moms in those first 2 to 3 weeks postpartum. And that is research shows that that is the time period when it is most likely to crop up.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, that's actually a question I did wanna ask. Is there a time when it's most, the risk is the highest? And can it
Yes.
come up later on in her postpartum, like
Yeah.
towards the end of the first year or something like that?
Yeah. So basically, what the research shows is that it tends to first appear within the first 2 weeks. That's what the
Mhm.
research shows. But I have to say, like the vast majority, and I know a lot of postpartum psychosis survivors, a lot of those people, it was like at 9 months, 6 months postpartum. And a lot of times, weaning can actually trigger it.
Okay. Is that a
Yeah.
hormonal thing or
Yeah, that's what they think. They think that it
Yeah.
has to do with a hormonal kind of connection. So, although the research, but again, the research can be biased, right? Like I'm saying, with the research in terms of incidence, it wouldn't count me because I was never
Yeah.
hospitalized. I wouldn't, I'm not even considered in that statistic. I'm not considered in that statistic because one of my episodes was after a miscarriage, right?
Mm.
So, even though the research they've done says that it tends to crop up in the first 2 weeks postpartum, that's not to say that it cannot occur after. It can occur. What they colloquially kind of say is that it can occur um up to 1 year postpartum. But research wise, if we're actually talking what the clinical data says, it's within the first 2 weeks is when it tends to creep up the most.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure I'll be sharing this episode with as many frontline and grassroots practitioners and professionals that I can. So, yeah, don't you worry about that.
Oh, for sure. And you
Because
can
as you said, it
also
is crucial information.
Yeah, and you can also share that anybody I have an Instagram account called Aaisha Alvi Writes, And anybody can use the link in my bio to read the foreword and first 5 chapters of my book for free.
Yeah, perfect. It's really a great read. I honestly couldn't it was so captivating. I wanted to keep going. Every
Oh,
morning I'd read it and then think, oh, I've got to go to work now, but I want to sit here and keep reading. But just to give your voice maybe a little break, I will read the foreword if that's okay.
sure.
Because I think it encapsulates, a nice way to conclude our episode. It says, "A mum like that," which is the name of the book that you're the author of, is often said that sharing stories of struggle and recovery is the very best way to raise awareness and reduce social stigma. Stories have a unique power to create change, teach, and stimulate compassion. The reality is that when individuals share their truth about mental health symptoms, most of the time they are met with ignorance, blame, and at worst, punishment. The process of breaking through stigma and encountering one's prejudice is uncomfortable, and it can feel like a bit of the earth underneath you has cracked. But what comes next is new awareness, life-saving change, greater compassion, receptive listening, and the potential to act less restricted by fear and prejudice. So, Aisha, through your book, A Mum Like That, your memoir, and the advocacy and support that you bring to mothers that are also going through these challenges, um, is so needed and so necessary, but so selfless as well on your part. So, thank you for the work that you do, and also for bringing a very difficult experience in your life, but using it to provide understanding, expertise, and most of all, compassion in a way that is literally life-changing. So I do really appreciate your work, Aisha, and your time. I know it's late for you where you're living, but your time tonight in sharing with us. If I could maybe get, just in conclusion, if you could, if you had a message for new mothers or mothers of the world at any point in their life, what would it be?
It would be, whatever struggle you're experiencing, whether it's postpartum psychosis symptoms or any type of postpartum mood or anxiety disorder, there is help out there. There is no reason to feel ashamed of what's happening to you. There's no shame in illness. Go and get the help that you need. It's out there. You can be well again. And thank you so much, Katura, for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to spread awareness.
Such an important message, and my gratitude, comes right from the heart. I'm so pleased that you were able to come and share this with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I trust that you enjoyed this episode. Postpartum is Forever is a podcast that is focused on honouring the mother. My wish for you is that you feel more aware, less alone, more empowered, and a whole lot kinder to yourself in your mothering. Your support means the world to me, and so I would be grateful if you could follow me on my Instagram page, Postpartum is Forever Podcast, and share this podcast on your socials. Rate and review this podcast on whatever platform you're listening from, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Big love.